end of Ep 5 sequence, and there was a lot of components that went into that. There's all this chaos going on. You want chaos, but you don't want confusion. You don't want the audience to be thinking, well, what's happening? Where is the killer? Why are they not just coming straight to the car? Why is the car not just driving away? Because I was there cutting it as we went, when you're 6 months down the line, you start to realize, oh, we need some extra dialogue here, bring the actors back in to get some pickups. Because I was there on location, I could make those suggestions. The writer and showrunner was there. He'd go, yeah, that's a good idea. And we'd just go and get those shots straight away.
Hi, I'm Jamie Hitchings of Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify their skill set. You can learn more on filmmakeru.com. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on our YouTube channel. Every week, we interview a film professional, and this week we are joined by Robert Frost, whose work includes Slow Horses and Hijack. Thank you so much for being with us, Robert. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. I'm looking forward to speaking.
So, what was the post-production process like regarding Slow Horses? You worked on episodes 1, 3, and 5, correct?
Yes, that's right. So I was brought on around March in 2023. That was when the shoot started. And they basically treat a season of the show like a feature film. It's one long shoot with one director. So the shoot was about 110 days all in all. And it's myself and the other editor for season 4, Harrison Wall, basically assembling as they go, sending out cuts to Adam and the director and the producers every few weeks so that they can sort of monitor that everything's coming together how they want it to. And after those, 100 days, we're straight into the fine cut, and it's quite a long process then of working with Adam, the director, who then presents his cuts to the executive producers, and then Apple eventually see them. So perhaps what's quite different to the model of TV shows in America is that our director is on for the long haul. It's not like they're a jobbing director that come in, have a couple of days in the edit, and then they're off onto their next project. Adam, our director, was there throughout the whole of that post process, really sort of getting into the weeds with us and the rest of the executives.
My friends and I would make little videos in our backyards, imitations of Indiana Jones and Star Wars. Eventually that need to tell stories became more of a technical interest and an interest in the art. To me, what's exciting is using cinema in its full potential, which is rhythm and sound design and music. Our job is to set up expectations and then deliver on them. I'm Brian Cates, and this is my course in film editing.
How closely did you work with him when deciding what shots to keep or cut? Were there moments that you guys had to maybe make tough decisions, or were there things that you were in love with that didn't make the fine cut?
Yeah, I think that is one of the sort of harder parts of the job sometimes, is knowing what to get rid of and what to keep. I think there was a couple of moments, certainly in towards the middle of the show, so episode 3, which is one of the episodes that I did. Um, Gary Oldman is amazing. He has so many good lines, and the writing is just incredible. And sometimes you do have to cull a few of those lines because it's just one too many. There's a sequence actually at towards the beginning of episode 3, where Lamb comes into the office and he makes his way all the way up the stairs, and he sort of says something to one of the other slow horses, Louisa, makes his way up to the top office, and the head dog is there. And that's a brilliant scene that they have, a sort of back and forth. But originally he had a lot of other lines as he made his way up. He checked in on some other characters, and some of my favorite moments were in there. But we sort of realized that with Slow Horses in particular, it's sort of walking this line between a thriller and a comedy, and sometimes you veer too far into that workplace comedy mode, and you actually just want to get on with the plot and find out what's happening next. So we cut a few of his little quips, and it made the start of the episode feel so much quicker, even though we're only taking out maybe 20-25 seconds worth of dialogue. You get into the scene with the head dog Flight, and you get her arresting him, and it just feels like the episode's moving on a lot quicker. So we certainly had to do a bit of that in that episode. And in the beginning, in the very first episodes, in episode 1, there's a whole thing around trying to convince the audience that one of the main characters, River, has been shot and killed. And that was a really interesting back and forth with myself and Harrison, the editor of episode 2, because what happens in episode 2 is you get the reveal of what actually happened. And we were swapping sequences, scenes, and shots back and forth right up until the last moment, because originally in episode 1, you were supposed to see River, the actor Jack Loudon. We were going to really try and fake it, but it just felt like too much of a cheat. So I ended up stealing a few shots that were for episode 2, and using stuff where we were more in the head of the grandpa character. And so, yeah, I mean, long story short, there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of experimentation to tell the story in the best way.
You had me totally convinced with River.
Good,
You
good.
had me like, there was that beautiful scene at the end after the climax. I don't want to give too much away, after the climax of the episode, and then the grandfather comes over and there's this water and we see him and he's like, what have I done? I was just like,
Yeah,
oh my gosh, like
exactly. And
I totally bought it.
that's great. And that stuff was originally episode 2. So, if you think about what you see in episode 1, you never actually see the character of River, that house. It's
Mhm.
just implied through the way that he's told to go there, through the fact that we're in this subjective world with the grandfather, that hopefully we managed to convince some people. So it's great to know that we got you.
I have to be honest, I was looking at this with a critical eye because I knew I had to
Mhm.
speak with you. So like you reeled me in, you reeled me in fully.
That's great. Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah. So you spoke a little bit about how you had to kind of restructure and kind of borrow some stuff from episode 2 to kind of make episode 1 more robust or believable. Was there any other place that you had to do any restructuring?
Yeah, actually, later on in episode 1, episode 1 is an interesting one because you have these two storylines that you're setting up. So you have the bombing at West Acres, the shopping center, and you have the killing of River, and that whole storyline. As it plays in the episode, that's how we had it for a long time. That's how it was written. But there was a time where we actually opened with River's killing and then went to the shopping center. There was quite rightly questions from execs and Apple, and even from ourselves, which is more interesting? Do we care more about the character, the main character, River, or do we want to see this attack on London? Um, and that had repercussions later down the line as well, when we eventually settled on the way it is in the episode. Um, Towards the end of the episode, you get a raid on a block of flats, and that was originally the very end of the episode, and it was a really fun, sort of exciting action ending. And we ended up bringing that a lot further forward in the episode, simply because it felt stronger to return to Lamb and Catherine and River for the end of the episode. So, I mean, I guess those are like very things. I guess those are very specific things to episode 1. But what I would say generally from like an editing point of view is that, being able to take a scene and move it around in an episode is very easy to do these days. But one of the things that I certainly learned when doing that is you can't just sort of copy and paste and say, okay, we're going to put this scene here. you have to look at the out of the scene that you're coming from and the in that you're coming into, and really try and sell that, because a lot of the time these ideas for restructuring sound crazy and you think this is never going to work, but you really have to do it as if this is what we're going to do, like this is the final version. You've got to sell it, because you never know. And it turned out that a lot of these structural changes we ended up doing were the better thing for the story, and you've just got to find those elegant ways of making those scenes feel like they were always written that way.
Yeah, you really kind of have to let the footage kind of decide for itself almost. You have to open it up and see where it goes. But the
Yeah,
first
and
episode was amazing. Like I loved how it went from macro to micro, macro to micro. I thought it was done very, very well. I'm a fan, obviously.
that's great to hear. And you do end up finding those um uh what's the word, you do end up finding those things that weren't originally planned. So where the flat raid sequence now sits in the episode, we're coming off the back of a newspaper showing the face of the bomber of the previous attack. And that wasn't originally as it's scripted, but it worked brilliantly, because it meant that we could hold on this haunting image in the newspaper and hear his testimony that he posted online, and play that through, and use the news footage to then bring us into the MI5 building, which then brings us into the flat. So when you do end up finding those things, it's really satisfying, because it feels like it was meant to be.
Around 28 minutes into the episode Identity Theft, which is the first episode, Lamb's having this conversation with a cashier, and he looks at a paper, and there's this great split edit that's used as a transition into the next scene. And I found it just very, I mean, we see split edits, L cuts all the time, but I found this one to be kind of very um intriguing, and I was curious about how that got developed. So is that one of the restructuring options that you did, and then you had to kind of figure out how to tie it in?
Absolutely, it's exactly one of those. We ended up moving that sequence towards the middle of the episode, and it was just a happy coincidence that we were coming off the back of that newspaper shot, and then coming into the hub, into the MI5 building. And it required a little bit of jiggery pokery. We had to do some VFX on the screens that we were showing in the hub, so that it all sort of married together. But when you find moments like that, it's really satisfying. And for me, that's one of the really fun parts of the job of being an editor, is finding those moments of connection, of ways that you can pre-lap lines, or let a line play into the next scene. All of that sort of connective tissue is really fun. And the joy of working with a director like Adam on an Apple project is you have the time to sort of find those moments and play around.
Penny for Your Thoughts is episode 3. David is in the bathroom and he's a bit confused. Like he's just kind of not very sure of himself, what he's done, and without giving too much away. You use some really intriguing angles to express his confusion. Could you talk a little bit about that particular scene?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's a good coming together of lots of elements. They shot these really interesting angles, but also Jonathan Pryce, who plays that character, is obviously an absolute veteran act. He's just incredible, and what that means as an editor is you can hold on shots of him and you don't have to cut away. Um, so my memory of that sequence was we had that coverage of him in the bathroom. We also had coverage of Catherine Standish on the other side of the door. So there was that option to go to that, but it just felt like, let's try and hold on these, low angles, the high angles as much as possible. And it's only when he turns and addresses her that we then, cut to her. And then it's a game of, well, what shot do you cut to and how long can we hold on her? Because if you've held on a shot for a long time, it's kind of nice to be able to do that again. Otherwise, maybe you're drawing attention to the editing. It doesn't sort of feel of a piece. So yeah, we hold on her until he, comes out of the bathroom and starts to confront her. Sometimes you're watching the dailies, and a shot's working, and you're like, oh, hope it still works. I hope that, you know, the camera doesn't bump or they mess up the line, because then you can hold on this and it's going to work.
A lot of the characters, especially Jack Lamb, are really complex and multi-layered, and like it's they're so multifaceted. What role did you feel that editing played in conveying kind of the nuances of these characters? You can pick any. I picked Jack because, well,
Mhm.
but how did you edit to kind of express their personalities over the course of the season?
The acting, we're so blessed that acting is so good that you have options to, you know. So the way that I would work is I'll watch through the material and I sort of make notes as I go. You know, this is a more feisty performance, this is a more subdued performance. And so when you're cutting the scene, you have those options to go to find those subtleties. And you know, it also comes down to the way that they shoot it as well. There's a sequence towards the beginning of episode 1 where River is talking to Louisa in a pub, and they wouldn't normally cross shoot a scene like that. You know, you would usually do the coverage of one actor to the next, but they did that on this scene because there was a bit of comedy, there was a bit of back and forth, there was a sort of awkwardness to that conversation, and it's quite hard to manufacture that when you're if you don't capture both actors at the same time. So that was a godsend, because it meant that you could get those really awkward, like, oh, did you mean that, and the sort of cringe comedy of that.
Mhm.
Um, and really, you know, sometimes I feel like I should maybe be saying this to actors, but sometimes what makes a take that makes the cut and that doesn't is the performance is important, but it's what they do after the performance. You know, do they say the line and then throw a look to a character that then you need to go to, or do they say it in such a way that you know, matches with with whichever shot you want to go next? So sometimes it is just as specific as that, as, you know, are they um cueing you into what the larger scene is, and you know, the structure of that scene, if that makes sense.
No, it makes complete sense. You kind of let the footage kind of guide you where you need to go.
It really does have to. Yeah, that's exactly right. You said it much better than I could. It's sort of the footage does speak for itself, and obviously there were moments when you're trying to manufacture something that wasn't there, and you're trying to shorten a scene, or remove some information that didn't you don't feel like you need anymore. But the general approach, I think, is to let the performances and the actors guide the scene. You know, they're so good at the comedy and the timing that you don't want to sort of spoil that by thinking, oh, maybe I should add a frame here or add an extra pause here. Um, you know, they've got more experience than me at this stage, so I'm just following their lead.
I completely agree. You kind of have to let the footage breathe a little bit and speak a little bit. So the interesting thing about Slow Horses is that it's got these fantastic dialogue scenes. Like we have these kind of um deep dialogue scenes, but then we have action scenes, you know,
Mhm.
and you said it's kind of a mixture between a few different genres. But can you talk a little bit about the difference in cutting a dialogue scene versus an action scene and how you approach those?
I think on the face of it, sometimes action can seem a lot more complicated. And it's not that it isn't difficult, but quite often a dialogue scene between 4 or 5 or more people, you know, all in a room talking to each other, can be more challenging, simply because, you know, sometimes I'll give you an example. There's a scene in episode 5 where Louisa is trying to sort of rally the troops and in Slough House and say, okay, what can we do? What can we do? And everybody's sat around in a sort of circle. And there are six characters, I think, in that scene, maybe more. Um, so the result of that is you get a lot of coverage. You know, you get a wide shot, you get singles on everyone, you get 2 shots, you get different angles on different characters from their eye lines from other characters. So in the beginning, it's quite a lot of material to watch, and it can feel quite overwhelming. And the way that I would do it is just watch everything. Is there any moments that really did make me laugh, or just stood out to me in the dailies that I think that just has to be in the episode. And I will sort of build the scene from those moments. So I wouldn't necessarily start at the beginning of the scene. I would put the wide down on my timeline and then say, okay, well, I know I'm going to be on this shot here. I know I'm going to be on this shot here. What are the matching coverages to those particular moments? And then build the scene out from there. And, often those early assemblies can be quite ropey. You are literally just cutting to whoever's speaking, and then you build it out from there. With action, on the other hand, sometimes the coverage that you're getting, the material, can be quite short. They're just focusing on one particular moment of the action. They'll nail that, and then they'll move on. So, in a way, it's easier to know which shot you might have to be on because that particular punch looks best from this angle. That particular moment of river running worked best on this particular shot. So in some ways that sort of anxiety from an editor of where do I go, sometimes it can be reduced down, I think, with action, because there were just fewer perfect moments. And again, in episode 5, there's a action sequence at the end of that episode where an assassin is attacking a car that River's inside, and that was just a really fun sequence for me to put together. It was something that Adam had a very strong idea from the beginning, that sequence was going to be as subjective as possible. We were going to try and stay inside the car and be with River and Flight and the other agents in the car. So although you have coverage from outside the car, you have shots from the point of view of the killer, you have extras running around all over the place and all the chaos of the streets. Knowing that the director had this idea for how the sequence could go helps me when I'm assembling it, because I have sort of a steer as to what material we're going to favor. And then you always have the other material if you decide to go another direction. And that was a really fun sequence because I was asked to come down and cut that on location. So I was there, and as they shot it, I was able to bring it in, work around my laptop. We could check that we'd got the sequence that we needed before they moved on.
So you've talked about a lot of the scenes in Slow Horses, but I'm just wondering, is there a particular scene or sequence that stood out to you as the most rewarding, or maybe the most rewarding because it was the most challenging to edit?
I think I probably would say it's that end of Ep 5 sequence. So maybe I can speak a bit more about that sequence because it was super fun to put together. But it was shot over the course of 4 nights, and there was a lot of components that went into that. And I think one of the things that's exciting about that sequence is that the action that's happening. There's someone firing on a car. There's windows being smashed. There's all this chaos going on. But one thing that became really apparent was you want chaos, but you don't want confusion. You don't want the audience to be thinking, well, what's happening? Where is the killer? Why are they not just coming straight to the car? Why is the car not just driving away? Why are the people in the car not just closing the door and staying safe in this armored vehicle? So one thing that we found is that because I was there cutting it as we went, often what happens when you're 6 months down the line, you start to realize, oh, we need some extra dialogue here. We need some ADR. We need to bring the actors back in to get some pickups. Because I was there on location, I could make those suggestions. And Will Smith, the writer and showrunner, was there. He'd go, yeah, that's a good idea. And we'd just go and get those shots straight away. We'd get those extra bits of dialogue that explained, oh, there's something in the way. We can't get out of here, or, get me the key for the handcuffs and all this sort of stuff. So it really helped that sequence become better, I think, because we were able to answer those sort of niggling questions so that you could just sort of sit back and enjoy the scene. I was going to say relax, but it's not necessarily a relaxing scene to watch. But yeah, all of that stuff was really important, I think, for that sequence.
That's got to feel very empowering as an editor. to where you're like, oh, you know what, I need this, or this would really help, and be able to have that type of relationship and be on set and do that, and be able to get the coverage that you need. That's gotta be amazing.
It was the first time that I'd had the experience quite like that, and Will and Adam, the director, was so open to that, and I felt very much involved, which was nice because sometimes as an editor you can, you're in a dark room somewhere away from the production, and not that you're forgotten about, but you're just squirreling away doing your work. So that was really lovely.
Probably one of the smartest things I've ever done for my career. It gave me all the tools that I needed to be able to jump into a new career. Getting myself into a mindset, thinking like an editor, being around people that I can talk to on that level was really invaluable to me.
A lot of the things that I learned from that class, I still think about.
I loved the classroom. I loved the computer stations. We built a sense of community.
And it also instills a lot of confidence in you to take that and go out into the world.
After I took the class, I felt very prepared to take the next step.
I owe Manhattan Workshop the career that I have right now. Things have been going great, and I really have the Manhattan Workshop to thank for that.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, that sounds awesome. Maybe I'll have that experience someday.
Just insist on getting down to set, I think, because the other side of it that was quite nice is that, yes, as editors, we're squirreled away in a dark room, but at least we're nice and warm and we've got coffee and we can do what we want. On set, they're there in the cold, in the rain, in the middle of nowhere. So it was quite nice to have a laptop to show them, like, look, this is what we're making. Look how amazing it's going to be. And, to have the cast come over and watch it take shape, I think sort of gave everyone the energy to keep going and really make it a great sequence.
So we have one more question, Robert. What I'd like to know is, I would like to know what's your guilty pleasure or kind of go-to television show or movie. It could be something new or old, something that maybe you'll always watch or you kind of always return to.
It's a great question. I hope it's not too much of a first-based answer, but I am very much a Star Wars fan, to the point that I will watch everything. All the TV shows, all the animated shows. There's a children's show at the moment for like 4-year-olds, and I'll still watch it because it's got lightsabers in it and Jedi. So that's definitely what's on in the background for me when I'm, just needing something to turn my brain off and just escape.
So you like to be in the in that world, the Star Wars world.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Is there a particular series or film that you kind of return to each time? What's your favorite out of the franchise, I guess is what I'm asking.
It changes. I think just like a lot of fans of that stuff, it changes. I really enjoy Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. They've just released them in the cinema over here in the UK. So I went to see them on the cinema screen for the first time in, glorious 4K Dolby Atmos sound, and it was amazing. So yeah, probably the original trilogy is still, because it's the craft, it's just from an editing point of view, it's just that all of the knowledge that I have now of like how they put that together is just very inspiring. So it's sort of like a guilty pleasure, but also a sort of craft sort of appreciation for it as well.
You can look at it as a guilty pleasure or honing your craft because you're looking at how they did those things and the pace and the timing and
yeah. How did they do that when they were cutting on film? I'm a part of a generation of editors that I've never touched a piece of celluloid film. I've not cut on film. I can press undo and it's easy. But yeah, it's always fascinating to me.
That's it for this week. You can check us out on filmmakeru.com or follow us on Instagram at filmmakeru. I'm Jamie Hitchings. Thanks for watching, and thank you, Robert, for a great interview.